The reason people are asking questions like this, and they think the question is so open, is not only due to Trump's history of what he said about Greenland and his, just aggressive foreign policy style. It's also because Trump is entertaining it. Trump told the president of Colombia that he better watch out. He is sending signals to the government of Iran saying that he will, and I quote, protect the protesters, which if he's not serious, and if he's serious, those two both have different radical consequences. If he is serious, then that could mean more intervention in Iran. If he's not serious, then that could mean egging on the Iranian people to think that, they might have our support in something against their government, when in the past we've seen the IRGC and others in defense of the Islamic Republic kill hundreds. And so you need to be careful when you use these types of words, but it's very clear that the president of the United States is attempting to create a specter of the United States president just arrested Nicolas Maduro in the middle of the night. What is he going to do next? He could do anything. Once again, relishing this type of, he's the madman. You got to be nice to the madman. You got to be careful with the madman, because you never know what the madman might do. And that unpredictability in Trumpism is supposed to give you extra leverage. It's supposed to give you access to leverage that otherwise would not have been credible. Oh, really? The president of the United States invading Greenland? That's ridiculous. Greenland is a part of Denmark, and Denmark is a member of NATO. Why would the president of the United States endanger the alliance? It also doesn't make any sense that the president of the United States would endanger the alliance, destroy America's image in that way, occupy a territory that's going to have a bunch of hostile locals that don't want to be part of the United States, when Greenland has already allowed American military bases on its territory and observation posts. And the odds of America being able to negotiate an expansion of that for whatever strategic needs that America has is not that difficult, is not that crazy. And so for most governments, hearing even an entertaining like a statement anywhere near America invade Greenland, you're like, oh, that's ridiculous. That's nonsense from like the 1860s and 1870s. This is modern America. Why would they need to do that? But Trump pulling the trigger on something like Venezuela has put in a lot more seriousness in the tone of those discussing this topic. Especially since after doing this, Greenland was also mentioned by Trump officials, Trump himself, and those around Trump. And the direct type of annexation and conquest rhetoric is only getting more aggressive.
On Greenland, what, Greenland now? Yeah. How did we come up to Greenland? So, do you expect to take an action against Greenland? Well, I don't want to talk about Greenland. Let's talk about Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine. We'll worry about Greenland in about 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days. Venezuela, we've talked so much about energy. By the way, I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dome sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
What would the justification be for invading Greenland?
Oh, I don't want to talk about Greenland now. I just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it.
European Union needs us to have it. We need Greenland. Not that we want Greenland or we would like to have Greenland. We need to negotiate. We need Greenland. We need Greenland. And not only do we need Greenland, but the Europeans need us to have Greenland. Why? Why exactly? But this is an emphasis on need. And it's not just from Trump. And you can see people like Nick Sorter, all these people around Tim Pool's like, I can't wait for Trump not to be a warmonger. I can't wait for anti-interventionism. I can't wait for America first. And then he's like, we need to take territory. We need to take the land of people who don't want us there. And their reaction to that, don't test 47, Denmark. Don't test him with what? Test him. How are they testing him? He's like, give us your land. And they're like, no, that's not testing him. That's that you're treading upon their sovereignty. While the conservative movement hyper obsesses about national sovereignty over globalism, while disregarding the national sovereignty of states that don't bother us. Here is Stephen Miller reaffirming the fact that the United States needs Greenland, and that America is NATO. And so it's not that we need it even in a sense of like, oh, we need it as in we need to, it needs to be more aggressively part of our structure, or they need to make agreements with our companies, agreements with our defense contractors, agreements with for more bases, for more this. No, Miller lays it out that Greenland needs to be part of the territory of the United States. Maybe not a state, certainly since the people there are probably not going to vote for the party that invaded their country. But maybe a territory like Puerto Rico or something that allows us to expand as a country. And to be quite blunt with you, and I do think this is part of it, at least for Trump, Greenland is a lot of territory. Makes America look a lot bigger on a map.
The formal position of the U.S. government since the beginning of this administration, frankly, going back into the previous Trump administration, that Greenland should be part of the United States. The president has been very clear about that. That is the formal position of the U.S. government.
Right, but can you say that military action against Greenland is off the table?
What do you mean military action against Greenland? The Greenland has a population of 30,000 people, Jake. The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the base?
A referendum. They're having a vote. They're having a vote on whether or not Greenland wants to be independent or not. Like it's like if Greenlanders say no, we don't want to be part of Denmark, ultimately, like they've made an agreement that they can do that. So Greenlanders.
Basis of their territorial claim. What is their basis of having Greenland as a colony of Denmark? The United States is the power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously Greenland should be part of the United States. And so that's a conversation that we're going to have as a country that...
Obviously, one of the few territories in North America that is still ruled by native peoples. Greenland is mostly made up of native peoples from the area. So we're talking about America, a tale as old as time. Some people say, oh, this is Trumpism, this is unique. No, this is a tale as old as time. We used to try to talk about conquering Greenland just like we used to talk about conquering Canada in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. Now that's more than like 100 to 150 years ago when our country is like 250 years old. So that's like more than half of our existence as a country ago. But it's also native peoples. So conquering native peoples with disregard for what they want, while saying, well, why does the other country get control of this land with zero regard for what the local peoples want? Why did we make all those like Native American, like commercials of like littering and Native American cries and like, oh, we care now. Oh, our hearts have expanded so much. You think Stephen Miller would say no if given the opportunity to conquer Greenland, if all it took was a few airstrikes, a few thousand dead? I really don't. If it got him more respect in the administration, more respect in Trump's eyes, moved him up that type of court jester style system of this royal court around Trump, moving up the ladder, he'd do it in a heartbeat. And that scares me about Miller.
That's a process we're going to have as a community of nations.
So you can't take it off the table that the U.S. would use military force to seize Greenland. You can't take it off the table.
Jake, I understand you're trying very hard to, which again, is your job. I respect it. It's great to get exactly the headline, right? That catchy headline.
I'm trying to get an answer to the question.
That says Miller refuses to rule out the United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation.
There's no need to think. We believe they should be part of us. Okay, well, Greenland says no. Denmark says no. All of the European Union, whether or not they're quiet about it in order to keep a good face with Trump right now or not, they still don't agree. So now what? Do we just keep saying we should be part of it? Is that just our position? Is this just for us to play patty cake? Is this just for us to entertain ourselves? Just to be like, well, we believe that should be part of us. You know what? I heard Nepal is the happiest place on earth. I think that should be a state. I think Nepal. My goodness. My goodness.
Talk about this.
Like, of course, people are going to ask, like, well, if they say no, which they do, very few people want to be part of the United States in Greenland. Then what? So of course, people are asking, then what? Especially in the immediate aftermath of America clearly disregarding international law to go into Caracas.
The context that you're asking of a military operation, nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
One last question,
doesn't
Stephen.
make any sense.
See, so he's saying, like, what? It's 30,000 people. It's Greenland. We're America. We're NATO. You don't even have to talk about military because no one would ever fight us on that. So it's the idea of, like, they will be part of America. It's inevitable because we're so mighty, we're so powerful to even talk military fighting, to even talk about a war, to even talk about conflict with these people is ridiculous because they are like an ant upon our shoe that we can crush. So, of course, it's ridiculous. Of course, they should be part of the United States. It's obvious. He said it's obvious. Stephen Miller's job is to go create a mandate. He's to go out there and to establish to the public why we should want Greenland, why we should. I mean, his job is to do that for a whole host of issues. But the way he's doing this is basically just pretending that everyone's always said that Greenland should be part of America, that it's always been the position of everybody. And it's not just a position of some politicians like 130 years ago. Certainly with a position that can be avoided if we just acknowledge the fact again that we can achieve everything we want by just getting more military bases, unless the desire is to make map bigger and be the sole arbitrary power that determines everything on the island. That the locals don't really get to determine it, we get to determine it. Because it's just so strategic to the United States, what the locals want really doesn't matter. Can we also apply this in other locations as well? Can we apply this near the Red Sea? Can we apply this near the South China Sea as well? What other places can we just declare as part of America right now? Gibraltar? Are we just going to go everywhere of any significance? We're just going to, the Suez Canal, why don't we seize the Suez and make that the 51st state of America? It's ridiculous. We could work with them, but there's this dream that's getting reposted. This is Katie Miller. This is Stephen Miller's wife. Soon, with a picture of Greenland covered in the American flag. Do you think Americans want this? No. No. Americans do not want this. There is no huge yearning from the American public. So they need to convince the American public that Greenland should be part of the United States. And the only justification that they've had so far is that it's strategically important and it has a lot of resources. But we can access that strategic importance through diplomacy, and those resources, we could do the same thing. And so trying to justify to the American public why we need to have this territory, especially when if we were to take it by force, if we were to make it so that there is no question, it will be ours. Screw what the locals want. We will crush you under our boot. If that's what we're doing, that will ruin the transatlantic relationship in a way that is going to be impossible to salvage in the immediate term. So it's to convince the American public and Congress, if Congress decides to do anything at some point in the future. I'm waiting at any point if Congress wants to, again, do fucking anything But the American public don't want this. This is a wet dream of Donald J. Trump of using a sledgehammer to do the job of a fucking like a thumbtack. It's not even. This is something where if we need more access to Greenland, we negotiate another base. We negotiate another. It's so simple, but instead, dreams of empire. And think about, again, the standards that we're breaking down, the norms about the conquest of territory, of saying that we get it because we want it, because it's important to us. Well, how many countries is that true for? Do you think China doesn't think the same thing about Taiwan? You think Russia doesn't think the same thing about Ukraine? What if Russia completely said, fuck anything else? Ukraine's just too strategically important. You know, it's wide open plains straight to Moscow. We want to get all the way to the territorial border of the Caucasus, of the mountains, of the Carpathian Mountains. From what position could we say no? We couldn't. It would just be a position of, well, you know, just might makes right. We would only say no if we were to say, well, we want that as part of our sphere. It's completely removing any norms or standards internationally. I mean, it's not even removing, it's just further degrading it down. But I have to ask, is that part of the point? Not that Donald Trump sees these norms and standards as like kind of like a pesky annoyance that he has to beat out of the way, but do you think that there's a possibility he just wants them dead, period? There was a report by Reuters, and it's talked about a little bit in this New Voice of Ukraine article. But the report essentially seems to stipulate that while the Russian government, and you can listen to the Russian ambassador to the UN talk about it during his speech at the United Nations, if you wanted to get a brain tumor from having to listen to Jeffrey Sachs up there. But if you went and you listen, you would see it's a very anti-American position on the operation. You don't do it, bad operation, terrible, terrible. But there's an idea that it's possible that not only will the Russians allow this to happen, which is seemingly happening, we can see that with our eyes, but that they could see this as the creationist fears. That Trump and his Monroe, or as he calls it, Donroe doctrine, is asserting American dominance of the North and South America, of this Western Hemisphere. And then the Russians can say, well, this is our sphere. Our sphere is Ukraine. Our sphere is Belarus. Our sphere is Armenia and Azerbaijan, and or not, maybe probably not Azerbaijan, good luck with that, or you know, Georgia. Our sphere is possibly the future Baltics, Romania, certainly Moldova. But the idea from a Russian perspective could be, you know what? It's already too difficult for us to really reach all the way to Venezuela. Well, Venezuela is useful for the energy export. It's useful to have an ally there. If we can't control the situation, it might be better to use this as a quid pro quo. You have your backyard, we have ours. You have your sphere of influence, we have our sphere of influence. In fact, this is the view of some in the Trump circle and the Trump nationalist foreign policy circle who do kind of view it like that that's the way it should work. And I've talked to them before. We've even debated them on this channel. This is not what they come out with and say immediately, because it's not nice to say, oh, Ukraine's just Russian sphere of influence, XYZ. They don't lead with that. It speaks terribly to the human soul to kind of give up and say that, you know, this country shall be yours and this country shall be yours, and that's just the way it is. But that's the position. And so the question is, will this be used as a type of quid pro quo? With the Russians saying, of course, you control Venezuela. Because I could see that phone call with Putin, like, you got Maduro. That was really tough. You know, you don't listen to those international cops, those international those losers. How about you have your sphere, I have mine? Would that be a persuasive argument? Trump, I think, is malleable enough that it's a concern. And considering that Trump is already making Putin-style, like, campaigns of grander Americana, Pax Americana empire, where we're gaining territories the size of several states, like we're expanding to something that would be the size of the goddamn Louisiana Purchase. By the way, I will say that this is enough of a concern that the Danish government seems more serious now than they ever have in the statements that they're releasing. Let me read to you the statement from the Prime Minister of Denmark. This is Mette Frederiksen. I must say this very clearly to the United States. It makes absolutely no sense to speak of any necessity for the United States to take over Greenland. Remember, Trump said need. That's why she's talking of necessity. The United States has no legal basis to annex one of the 3 countries of the Kingdom of Denmark. And there's also no legal basis to go into Caracas, so that's probably part of the reason why they have concerns. At least no international legal basis. The Kingdom of Denmark, and thus Greenland, is a member of NATO and is therefore covered by the alliance's collective security guarantee. We already have a defense agreement between the Kingdom of Denmark and the United States that grants the U.S. broad access to Greenland. In addition, the Kingdom has made significant investments in the security in the Arctic. I therefore strongly urge the United States to cease its threats against a historically close ally and against another country and another people who have stated very clearly that they are not for sale. So she says they're not for sale. So the idea of, oh, you don't need to talk about military action. If they're not for sale and the people of Greenland don't want to be part of the country, then what's the plan if it's not military action? Well, there could be other subversive activities. We do know that the administration is looking into or has looked into the idea of, could we build support up locally in Greenland for American annexation? I think the result they found was probably no. There could be questions about bribing local officials and other ways that they could try to turn Greenland towards being part of the United States. But I find it very difficult to believe that they're going to be able to build up significant support amongst the public through these types of subversive activities. I can imagine that they might be able to pay off some local official, but to be able to pay off the public, no, I don't think that's as easy. And I think that'll be a lot more difficult. And so what happens when they meet that bump in the road, when the subversive activities or the paying off of politicians or the, whatever other strategies that they might be trying to approach outside of the direct aggressive seizure of land with military force that would be of terrible consequence to the United States and terrible consequence for the transatlantic alliance, could be the death of the transatlantic alliance, NATO, and the transatlantic relationship in over 80 to 100 years of building up these relationships, these bonds pre and post World War II. Now, I will say, though, it is a NATO country, and the consequences of doing it might make it so that the administration pursues other tactics that ultimately lead to them dragging their feet. And I think the hope of the Danish government is that they'll either be able to offer something that is comparable, at least to America's interests, in expanding their presence on the island while avoiding annexation, avoiding any type of military or other sort of confrontation. But if the administration is set on just making us bigger on the globe, if the administration is set on having complete unilateral control of the island over the locals, over Denmark, over NATO, then that's going to be a lot more difficult. But it's also not an operation that can just be done under the president's orders to arrest one person. You would have to put troops on the island to control it. You would have to take over the island. This isn't like the same operation with Maduro, which might be illegal under international law, but could wrap up in 12 hours, and then you have your forces out of the island, out of Venezuela, if you don't plan to stay, even though they float the idea of having troops on the ground. To keep Greenland, you would have to have troops on the ground. The emphasis for Congress to do something afterwards would probably be stronger. And so the question is, will Trump be in a better chance, or a better chance to get no resistance, a better chance to get things done, a better chance to not be stopped by Congress now or in a year? I would say now. In a year, it's more likely that the Democrats take back the House. It's not guaranteed, especially, you know, since I don't think Trump really holds to the same norms and standards that other people do when they engage with our election systems. But if Democrats take back the House, taking that type of direct action without the support of Congress, when Congress can call up the War Powers Act, when Congress is much more sympathetic to the continuation of NATO's alliance, there's a chance that the next year would probably be the best period for Trump to act militarily if he was to do so, if you lose control of Congress. If you lose control of Congress past that, you would just only have subversive actions, which I'm still highly suspicious of its abilities to succeed. Again, it just makes so much more sense for the United States to just expand our current existing relationship, which is why, again, I come back to the idea that it really might just be that they want to see that big, big map.